So first, let's go through some introductions. Help me out, say your name, let us know what you're working on in life, and what your goals are for this week.
Well, first of all, thank you, Christian, for pinch hitting for us there, and thank you to Facilitate and Clarion for always putting on such a great conference. Advanced Therapy Week, in my book, is where the things start and a lot happens. My name's Lynn Fischer. I am the CEO and Managing Director of KMAK Capital, a family office, also the founder of Title 21 Health Solutions, and we transacted with private equity about 2.5 years ago, and now stepped down from my operational role as CEO, turned over the reins, and now running KMAK Capital and having a great time investing in cell and gene therapy and biotech. And it's very exciting.
Thank you so much, Lynn. As the second panelist, we would like to introduce Sven Kili. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Christian, and also, thank you for stepping in at the last minute. That's very brave of you. So good morning, everybody. I'm Sven Kili. I'm a partner with Saisei Ventures, and Saisei Ventures is a VC firm, a boutique VC firm focused on building really exciting therapeutic cell and gene therapy companies, and also investing in seed and Series A. We have a focus on Japan, where we look at the incredible technology that's coming out of Japan, amazing science that's being done, but really the entrepreneurial environment's not great. And so we have quite a unique approach to this in that we create and work with companies in Japan, also within the US and Europe, but those in Japan, we then keep in Japan and we bring in expertise from the West. And the idea there is to really grow the entrepreneurial ecosystem. My very brief history is prior to coming onto the dark side of investing as a VC. I spent many years as an operator, and so I know most people around here. I've worked in large and small pharma, everything from company creation, formation, fundraising, non-clinical, clinical, and commercialization. What am I looking for? I'm looking to catch up with friends old and new. That's about it for me.
Thank you so much, Sven. As next in line...
Help you out, it's Tay. This is impressive, I think, after a week of good weather in JPM and the difference in weather here, we have a full room. So I think we're actually privileged to be in the company of, I think, colleagues, friends who care about the CGT sector. So by way of introduction, I was formerly the Chief Access Commercial Officer at a company in Chicago called Avexis, which sold to Novartis, which was featured on Michael's slide. So we had to scale in real time on reaching babies in 55 countries and treating 5,000, and cumulatively returning back nearly over 6 billion of an 8 billion acquisition with real-time setbacks. So that was my previous life as an operator. And most recently, I joined, I do a couple of things. One is work for a venture capital in London, only indexed on genomic medicines, cell and gene therapy, and build companies from a seed stage. And one of the seed companies, Trogenics, which I will talk about a bit more, we are bringing gene therapy for GBM as a one-time treatment. And all the fun and games that has with it. And thirdly, I also am a fellow at the Alliance of Regenerative Medicine, supporting the CEO, Tim Hunt, with many things that we all care about in this sector on how we're going to commercialize and keep the mood music up. So looking forward to talking to people here where we can be of service, but also how we can collectively elevate the sector, the mood music, and where we need to go to hit the ambition that we saw in 2030 that was on that slide.
So I'm John Watkins from Texas Teachers Retirement System. So I've played mostly in the public markets for the last a little over 20 years there, and been following the space for quite a while and looking to watch how it's evolved and looking to help invest and kind of grow some of these companies to bring therapies to other folks. So I guess I would say about my journey was probably a little shorter than most of yours. It was a 30-minute flight. So not too bad.
I'm glad you made it.
It was tough.
Yeah, thank you so much for introducing yourselves. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Barkey. I was running a company with the same name for more than 25 years in the field of cell manufacturing. Our focus was entirely on cell recovery. Therefore, we took care about thawing of cryopreserved cells. And Audrey is sending her warmest regards to all of you. Unfortunately, her flight was delayed, so we apologize for her not being here. And let's start with you, Lynn. Audrey left some questions behind, which I'm now willing to let you know. What specific criteria, Lynn, especially you in representation of KMAK Capital, you prioritize when evaluating emerging biotech companies in the advanced therapy space?
Great. Well, thank you, Chris, by way of Audrey in Philadelphia. So, well, first of all, let me give you some background, a little perspective. At Title 21, that was founded in 2001, a quality management software, and we were early in cell therapy and then cell and gene therapy for manufacturing execution system. So we were quite privileged and very, very lucky to work with some of the greatest institutions in the country, let alone the world, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Stanford, Fred Hutch, Mayo Clinic, and we learned from them. So our philosophy at Title 21 was always stay very close to the patient. So after we transacted and decided, hey, let's put our money where our mouth is and start investing in these earlier therapies, we decided that the criteria would, number one, be the pilot. Just like Jamie Dimon bets on the pilot versus the plane. Now, maybe you might want to bet on both, but definitely the people. And we look for not only really good science, there's a lot of great science out there. I think as the capital markets were slow and it was tough to raise, I think the industry, the scientists and the clinicians, especially the engineers and scientists, did a good job on focusing on the science to get it as far along as possible. So what we're finding is there's a ton of great science. So we really focus on the management team, how strong the science is. Typically, we're doing later stage, phase 2, phase 3. However, I will say we make exceptions to the rule. And we recently invested in Siren Biotechnology, an AAV therapy for glioblastoma. We believe in the team there. We believe in what they're doing. And so that was an example. The other mechanism we use, let's say if the risk might be a little farther out and the risk profile where we want to invest, we also have KMAK Foundation, which is purely to improve the lives of people, patients through education in health sciences, healthcare. So we will bet on a company if we really believe in them on the foundation, but they might be a little earlier. So for example, with Siren, we actually made 2 investments, one on KMAK Capital side, one on the foundation. So the criteria is all about high impact, high value. If we don't, who will? And we don't mind going in early, but again, the preclinical data has to be very, very compelling.
I sense there is some part is culture, you mentioned, right? That the culture of the specific company you're looking at was also part of your decision process.
Well, I'm glad you have picked that up, Chris. Thank you. Yes, I'm big on culture of a company. That's something that was near and dear to my heart at Title 21. I always told new employees and our team, if there was one thing I was going to power steer, it was the culture, because culture drives everything. Someone great said culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I really like the culture at Siren and the culture at like another company we invested, Avio. What I'm also seeing in the market is there's a move to get closer to the patient, closer to the patient, get to the clinic as fast as possible. It gets expensive. I'm also seeing that founders are being quite clever in how they're getting to the clinic. And they're looking at other forms, other ways to get to the clinic, rather than paying some of the high prices that are required. They're doing things like using concierge services or tying in with the strategic that has some access to a larger population.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I resonate a lot because when we got acquired by Azenta Life Science, we have been about 100 employees at that time. For us, that was really one of the key criteria. Also being selected by, of course, various bidders, but at that time, Azenta made the deal. And Sven, when I take this, let's say, into your world, how, let's say, part is culture, of course, and what other strategies you think are relevant to be appealing to potential investors?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think, absolutely agree with Lynn. Culture is critically important, but a lot of the companies that we tend to look at or create, it's almost too early for a reasonable, decent culture to have developed, and you have to help that grow. So it's about putting the right people in place. I'll probably go back a little bit, and I know this may sound redundant, but we are not in 21, 22 anymore. And things have changed a lot. And that may sound a bit patronizing, but it's really interesting how many people I speak to with new companies that are looking for seed funding that still feel it's almost in that environment. And we've moved very much from a seller's market into a buyer's market. And I think this is quite a good thing, because what we need to do is we need to focus on building companies with the right technology, the right approach, the right people, and the right attitude. And only that way will they survive through the really tough times that we're experiencing now and we will continue to experience for a while. So when we look at companies, and I've had this when I had my company, I had some really amazing scientists, and they got so excited about doing cool science, and that was fantastic. Doing cool science is really, really fun. But if you can't create that or change that science into a therapy that can go out and treat patients and make patients' lives better, it's useless. You may as well go back to academia. And so working with a lot of academics and academic founders, what we look for is an understanding that there's a realization that this cool science has to translate into something that will become a therapy. And that has a number of components. One, first and foremost, and I think many people in this room will agree, you've got to be able to manufacture it. You've got to be able to scale it either up or out, and you have to do it in a way that is not going to require 10 football fields worth of manufacturing facilities. You have to find a way to be able to do it well, and you have to understand sufficiently your product to know where that's going to go. You also need to understand the science in the area that you are going to be trying to address, and really understanding what are the other therapies that are out there, what are the other therapies that are being developed. And this is critical. If you are a young company, it behooves you to know what your counterparts and your peers are up to. So if you've got a CD19 CAR and you're going after a target, you should know who everyone else is that's got a CD19 CAR that's going after that target. And not only that, you should understand what are their strengths and weaknesses and what are yours, so that you can make an objective assessment of your product. And so it's really about understanding that how you are going to take this really cool science and turn it into a therapy that is going to change patients' lives. You don't have to have done it all at the seed stage or even Series A, but you need to understand how you're going to do it. And this then comes back to part of what Lynn was saying about the people. It's having the right people around the table. And you don't have to have, all of the execs that have done it 10 times, but you have to have access to those kind of people. So you have to have gone out and understood what it takes to develop a therapy, what it takes to manufacture it, what it takes and where you're going to fit into the therapeutic treatment paradigm. And these are all really important things that we look for very, very early on. Because if you don't understand your technology and you don't understand the strengths and the weaknesses, because no therapy is perfect, but if you don't understand those weaknesses and you're not willing to own up to them and say, yeah, you know what, it does X and that's not perfect, but this is what we're going to do to get around it or to address it. It's about being honest early on and taking that forward so that we can make a real difference in patients' lives.
Sven, that was very interesting and brings me to the next panelist and question. Tay, we share a little bit the same history because I was with the company allowed to enter into the, let's say, Novartis world, either by the manufacturing process as well as we have been appointed to be one of the first companies on their campus. So we had an office at Novartis in Switzerland, and with the same heritage you have with Novartis, and now as a venture partner, what would you like say to in terms of challenges and what makes biotech attracted? I mean, you have two worlds now, Novartis world in you and the venture partner world. So I'm excited to hear that.
So I'm excited for you having a coffee with you afterwards to hear about the good, bad, and ugly of that relationship. And look, I'm laughing here because look, I actually didn't go to a gene therapy school or a cell therapy academy, but I'm going to do a bit of back in history and where we are. But look, we done our first deal around a decade ago with Carl June's lab in UPenn. And the punchline at that time was, will you ever do a tech transfer? Will you ever, file an IND? Or will this therapy ever go beyond the United States? So I think Michael's graph and Wayne White sort of validated why we went in, and we learnt the hard way. And then Kite sold and Juno sold, and the rest is history. So fast forward, then we wrote another big check for $8.7 billion for Avexis. And I think at the time, 12 patients had been treated. So we're not talking hundreds and thousands and big random. We're talking like, just a handful of patients. And, the question at the time is, what is that going to be? A US-based company? Are we going to scale it? Are we going to elevate manufacturing, regulatory things, learning about liver tox in real time of older, heavier babies? So, and then having setbacks, Chris, in real time. And, setbacks in Novartis aren't good, right? So I'm in any corporate because you have a certain assumption going in on a deal case, and you've written the check, and now you're going to have to make it work. So we closed some programs. We had a hold on the intrathecal, but what that actually meant was the jewel in the crown, the IEV systemic therapy, taking that to sort of, over 4,500 patients worldwide. What Sven was talking about, that kind of deep, inch-wide, foot-deep experience of learning how to do this, being responsible of how you're going to, I call it three things. Start with the commercial end in mind, how this therapy will get to patients. Number two, how can I choose a pathway that's going to save timelines or shave millions and not do what I have done before? So how do I reset what do I know and arm myself with those experts or people or ecosystem that people who have failed got up and restarted and tried to make a go of it. Number three, I think why we're all in this room and what we do is because we're driven by that desire to get these therapeutics to patients away from a playground of academic projects. So Chris, I think for good reasons, companies over-indexed on founders and scientists, just to get this field going. I think we're at a watershed moment or an inflection point Now that I'm on the other side raising 60 million for a GBM company, which, you know, people hear the words graveyard and it's going to work and everyone else has failed and why are you going to make it? So look, we're in a company of 6 people. We have a seed of 15 million and we have an excellent reception in JP Morgan. Both, so there's 2 camps. You've got the pharma partners and then you've got the VC world. I don't want to offend any people in VC like Sven and myself, but I found a little bit on the VC side, there's a lot of C going on and less V. And on the pharma venture side, I think we've seen a lot of interest because of naturally the attrition of their pipelines. But 6 people company, and I'll share this story with you. When they approached me for a board role and a chief strategy officer in fractional capacity, raising a 60 million, I actually said, I don't think you need me, I'm a late stage guy. But I think they were judging the mood music of investors and the market to say, will you ever get this to patients? Show us the case of where this can go and what type of label you'll get to and how you think about that, because that then speaks into your Series A valuation, your B valuation. And so what I've started to pick up is you need to be very, very intentional around what is investors? How do you subgroup the investors and who cares? And is curious about solving complex puzzles, but is going to be with you from the A round to the B round to C round, or is it a 1-year playground, or is it going to be a 4-year? And I think that thesis and those questions you need to ask yourself are critical. And I'll just close by saying on that point, the question is a very internal one around: do you go fast alone, or do you partner to go further together? And I've found, certainly in my world, you know, I've had Novartis not bought of Exis, it would probably be in a US-based company. Had we not partnered in certain areas of manufacturing, where you sell on the sales area, we probably would not be able to reach, you know, some of the graphs that we saw earlier from the Wainwright presentation. So I think that humility very early on around, you know, what type of partner you're looking for, what investor, how that's going to be valued, the expertise that Sven touched on that it's going to bring are very, very critical elements. So that's pretty much what I'd leave some of the audience with. Is, are you going to go alone, or are you going to both partner to go further together?
Thank you so much, Tay. And I know John is already itchy on his feet. But John, I'm really new to the investors field, and I have this entrepreneurial view on this. And I'm really happy if you would share with us how you, as an institutional investor, look at this. Because I can't, let's say, from my point of view, I always have a view on the organization. The product needs to be good, needs to be really impactful, but my feeling is always that the culture, which Lynn already highlighted, or the other topics we learned today, what's the passion behind and the power, and how do you see this over the recent years developing?
Sure, thanks. So we've been following the space for quite a while, and like you said, there has to be cool science. Well, we've kind of, early on, we were looking at cool science and looking to make investments, but we're more risk averse than a VC would be. We're long term, and we don't have the experts that you guys have in your firm. So what we started out more so investing in more the tools around these technologies and how do you make these products. We've moved further along in our evolution. Now we're actually looking at single companies and certain technologies. And what we've learned over the last like 5 years or so is the cool science isn't always enough. There has to be a market for that science, and that the product has to fill a need that the market doesn't already have. So the example I would use would be in hemophilia. The gene therapy there is a very cool science product, but there's some pretty good products already in the market. There's other areas where, like SMA, where there wasn't treatments, really great treatments in the market yet. So the cell and gene therapies there fill a better need, and that is a better market for those therapies. So the science is great, but you also have to be able to have a market where there is a need for patients, and this has to be a significant improvement over kind of what's out there already. And obviously the payers are an issue as well, because these therapies are quite expensive, so you have to find something that the payers are going to be willing to pay for up front.
Can I comment on that?
Please.
So I acknowledge what you've said around hemophilia. I'm not a hemophilia expert, but there's some absolutely you got to focus in on the unmet need. But this kind of when we first done cell therapy, people, you're never going to be able to charge $500,000 for this product. And there was patients in the trial who had failed two stem cell transplants. And folks in the audience know what the fully loaded cost of a stem cell transplant is in the United States. We had the same issues with gene therapy around a loading dose costs $800,000 of the current standard of care, and then $400,000 each year on, and we've got data going out now 9 years of a child that can sit, stand, walk, eat, go to school independently. I mean, that's huge. For these families, it's like a diagnostic odyssey, right? For let alone getting treatment that, somebody to respect and value the condition they have. So I honestly, I think as a community, as a collective group of people who care, we've got to take this head on. And actually, even with hemophilia, it's the incentives in the system that are misaligned, that a provider may not want to give a cell therapy product for reasons beyond the science or the compliance, or how do we get it into the community. And so we've seen these in real time, but there are ways you can find out. I think with the hemophilia, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I'd say, look, if you're getting to a place of 9, 10 years of data, those companies and manufacturers also have to show willingness and flexibility in their offering. But at the same time, I think payers and healthcare systems, need to come out of the 19th century and come into the 21st century and support some of these medicines in the way I think they have uptake. So I know those were slides that we heard about. The commercial model and the reimbursement makes or breaks this whole technology. And we got to lean in really heavily on that. Otherwise, investors aren't going to put money in it.
Can I maybe come in on this? And I'll agree almost with both of you, but I think there's a difference. So there are a few of you out there, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. There are a few of you out there that have been here kind of since the beginning, when the dinosaurs walked the cell and gene therapy planet. And you may remember, many, many years ago when we were developing gene therapies, and we had groups at UPenn, Jim Wilson, and other groups in Italy where those gene therapies didn't go very well, and we had patients with some big complications. And so gene therapy went down, but cell therapy started coming up, and cell therapy was really exciting. And I was fortunate enough to work on and actually develop and have one of the first combined cell therapy ever to be approved. But one of the challenges that we had was we'd go to the regulators, and it doesn't matter whether it was the FDA, the EMA, the PMDA, whoever it was, we would walk in and they would say, "What are you doing here? Why are you speaking to us? We deal with therapies, we deal with drugs." And we'd say, "Well, cells are drugs too." And we would spend a lot of time having to convince them, to educate them and work with them, to the point where they started understanding that cell therapies could be used as therapeutic modalities. Fast forward to the early days of gene therapy, and once again, fortunately, I led the development, approval, and commercialization of the first ex vivo gene therapy. And within that, for ADA SCID, this was a product for a very small number of patients that absolutely saved their lives. These are patients who die if they don't have it. We also developed a product called for metachromatic leukodystrophy. These are patients who, if they don't have this therapy and they don't have it when they're pre-symptomatic, they die. It's very simple. You don't get it, you die. That's it. You're a child and your parents have to live with that. And we have, to all of those days, SMA also, we've hung on to this rare disease way of thinking. And we tend to get very comfortable with ourselves, thinking, well, these are cell and gene therapies. We're special. These aren't antibodies. These aren't small molecules. We do cell and gene therapies. We're right at the front, the bleeding edge of everything. So, of course, we're better than everyone else. And As we move into bigger indications, hemophilia, sickle cell disease, which are not really that big, but relative to what we've done up until now, these are big indications. We've gotten so used to drinking our own Kool-Aid about how amazing we are and how amazing this therapy is, that we've almost forgotten that we have to convince the regulators and the payers about how good these therapies are. And we haven't done the best job up until now. And we look around, we've all heard the stories about sickle cell patients not wanting to have this therapy. One, it's very expensive. Two, it's autologous. Same with hemophilia. Some of them in certain parts of the world even believe Bill Gates is part of that and has put his tracking chips into them. And the stories out there are absolutely incredible. And we've done a really poor job of convincing the payers and the regulators, and critically the patients, of how incredible these therapies are. Because yes, they do what a small molecule could do, or a large molecule in some stages, but they do it better for longer and very often for little or no adverse events. And that's where the value lies. And we haven't done a great job of that.
I think it seems like we're on the cusp of that changing as well. If you look at all the cell therapies in immunology right now, that seems that viewpoint has to change for those products to actually get to the market. And the investment behind the sheer numbers in that area demonstrates that the viewpoint must be moving forward, in my opinion.
John, Sven, I hate to do this, but unfortunately we're running out of time, and I want to give all of us the last, let's say, words of wisdom for what is the, let's say, top 3 criteria for you for due diligence in order to proceed. And we have proven that the first panel is probably the best after a little warm-up time, and next time we need more time. But Lynn, what's the top 3 for you?
Well, it has to be great science. I share your bias, having come from the operator world. The founder sets the culture early on. That's the seeds, whether it's high-performing or dysfunctional. And the other thing that I didn't mention is you have to have someone in there, in the company, early on, who has a very, very strong business acumen, a strategist, a marketer, probably not, finance guy, but someone who knows how to communicate to the market. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a PhD, I'm not a Wharton guy. I'm just somebody who knows how to communicate to the market. And that's all I did at Title 21, and that's what I'm helping these founders do. So really you need people who can, as you were talking about, market to the regulators, to the patient's family. There's a lot of reasons why there's skepticism in especially the Black community about some of these drugs, because if you look at the history and some of the early trials. So there's reason for it. So, but having a balance, it has to move from a science project or a founder's scientist's hobby to a commercial business. And you don't want to, you want to always have the altruistic, but at the end of the day, the investors are looking for the exit, the ROI, what is their return. And at the end of the day, you got to be able to do both, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can have it all. You can do good in the world and get these therapies to the patients and make a lot of money in the meantime, too.
John, Tay, Sven, anything you share, or you have more criteria? And then
I think Lynn kind of hit the nail on the head there. I mean, you have to have good science. You have to have good people. You have to also have a focus on the market and know how to communicate that to other investors. And so you can have it all if you combine all those things, but it can take time, and patience is another thing I would add to that, is being able to be patient with a company to let these things develop, because it does take a long time to jump through all the hoops to make it to the market.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to repeat what Lynn said, and I think indexing on the people, founder, I think this panel's in alignment around, as you index on science, you've got to put the same weight behind that team. And the only thing I'd say is around in this sector, sometimes the map isn't the terrain. So the lived experience is what my mean making of what Lynn is saying is that lived experience of being vulnerable upfront in front of investors, how to tell that story, knowing you don't have surety of the answer in 5 years or 10 years into the business, but gating that in a thoughtful way to respect and be a steward of people's capital, and then making sure that where you're going to get that return, I think, is going to be critical. But again, I think having that lived experience of doing it, seeing it, and getting these therapeutics to patients, I mean, that's why I stay in the space. It's like a drug. It's like once you see that benefit, like we've got people who took a cell therapy who are living like 12 years.
And closing words now with Sven.
So my closing words, thank you, Chris, would be absolutely agree, Lynn and John, what you guys have said, and Tay, so I'm not going to repeat those. What I would say in addition is an unwavering belief in moving your product, not your science, but your product forward. A willingness to lift your head up off the table or the bench and look around regularly. And an excitement, because what we do is absolutely incredible. This changes patients' lives. It saves patients. It makes families whole. And so we are very honored and very fortunate to work in this space. And let's not forget that. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you, and welcome to Dallas.
Thank you.